probably have to send it, or I can try recording here, but it might let me do that. I don't know. It said like requested permission or something, but now it says it's recording, so okay.
Okay, so I'm recording. Of course, the question becomes then, how do I send that to you if whatever?
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
I'm not sure either, but we'll figure it out. So I take it you can hear me fine?
Yep.
All right, I hear you well as well.
Oh.
I'm gonna go full screen.
Sorry, I'm just trying to set this up. I dropped it. So.
You have questions.
Yes, I have some questions for you.
Sure.
So I'm going to probably start with the questions about you as being a leader first from Ms. Lolbert, and then move on to the ones I wrote, which are more about your teaching leadership, because Dad said that you teach leaders. I think that's pretty cool. But oh, sorry about that. My first question for you is, what leadership skill do you employ most frequently? And can you describe a scenario when you used that skill?
Okay. I think the most frequent skill that you use is communication. Your ability to communicate is key. If you can't communicate, you can't be a leader. And you have to clearly explain what your expectations are, what the focus is, what the job is, mission, all of those things. So that ability to communicate clearly, goals, expectations, and then hold people accountable for those, I think is one of the main skill sets. I mean, it's kind of a constellation, but that is one of the main things.
Okay.
And you asked, when do I use that? All the time. Think of a particular instance. Let me come back to that, but right off the top of my head, I can't.
Okay.
I just know that that's just something to do all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. I feel like this might be a similar question, but what thing do you feel is most, or one of the most important qualities of a successful leader? And why do you feel it is an important quality of a leader?
My initial thought on this is the ability to handle a crisis. I mean, you need a leader to, communicate vision, those kinds of things. But when you really, really need a leader is when things go wrong. And to handle a crisis means that you've already built trust, or the people trust you, because you're making decisions with input, certainly, but because it is a crisis, because it's an emergency, because it's something that needs to be done, right now, you are, you're demanding, you're telling people, you're directing people, you're taking input, but you're very quickly saying, do this, this, and this. And so the ability to handle crisis, handle it well, knowing what needs to be done, knowing your business. So in saying that, there's some things that are kind of underneath. You've built trust already. People know that you know what you're doing and respect you, even when they might disagree. So you've built that level of confidence and trust with them. And that they also know that when you're saying do this, that if it's a terrible mistake, they're not afraid to push back and say, you might want to reconsider that. I'm doing it. I'm headed that direction, but you need to hear this and this, and this might go wrong. And so there's, again, goes back to that communication and things along that line. I would also say this sort of as a side note in leadership. If you're in crisis mode a lot, something's wrong. I mean, it goes back to being a firefighter. If you as a firefighter are putting out lots of fires, something's wrong. You have an arsonist out there, or you have bad policy. So what I'm saying is the best firefighters are sitting at the firehouse. That's what you want your firefighters to be doing. You want them to be at the firehouse doing nothing. Because if there's a fire, something's gone wrong. Now, inevitably, there's going to be fires. Lightning's going to strike, that kind of thing. But a good fire chief goes to the city council, makes sure that there are codes and codes inspectors and that they are enforced, that homes are built right, businesses are built right, sprinkler systems are put in, and that fires don't happen. The same way with a leader. A leader manages his business and develops his management team in such a way that he doesn't have crises. He doesn't have things going wrong. And any business that has heroes on a daily basis is a bad business. Something's wrong. Now, sometimes, when you have a startup and you have things that you're doing the first time, there's going to be those learning curves and those extraordinary things. But day-to-day business, shouldn't be that way. But, so there's kind of that, when I talk about, leaders handle crisis, I'm saying a lot of underlying things too. Trust, development of your team, put into place policies, different things so that everybody knows how to do their job. All of those structures are there too that they've developed. Okay.
So there's an aspect being able to fight the fight when it comes time, as you described a firefighter, but also the aspect of thinking ahead and kind of planning ahead for things rather than just working in the urgent moments.
Yeah, I heard I think it's an African proverb, but it's, and I don't remember where I heard it from, but I heard it recently where someone said, "You dig your well before you're thirsty."
Yeah.
So it's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. So I guess I'll move on to the next question.
Okay.
Is what piece of advice would you give someone about leadership who's preparing for a leadership role? So I imagine there's a lot of that, but I don't know, what do you think is?
Okay. So you're asking, how do I prepare for somebody for leadership? Say the question again.
Like what kind of advice would you give to someone who is preparing to go into a leadership role? Maybe something really important that they should think about going into leadership.
It does come with a cost. So, count the cost. Be willing to be, I'm trying to think of the right word to use. You're not going to be good at it, more than likely. Going into leadership, you have to accept the fact that you're going into a new role and you're going to be incompetent. And maybe that's what I'm looking for. Expect you to, for yourself, that you don't have to know everything, that you don't have to be perfect. Be humble enough to ask questions and listen to people, because sometimes you become a leader over people that have other skill sets, and they should hopefully know their job and be competent at it. And you're going to be managing them. So you need to understand their job, not to become a professional at their job, but know enough of how to give them information about the bigger picture, things that they don't know. Um, Certainly trust them, but also know how to hold them accountable. So it's learning how to um, understand your new role, be humble enough to ask questions, and then, you know, be willing to learn how to manage people, how to listen to people, that type of thing.
Yeah. So you described a familiar feeling when you said you're going to feel incompetent. When someone is trying to take on a leadership position and feels like, I don't know how to do this yet. I'm clueless, but I'm trying to learn. What can that person do to? I'm not even sure what I'm trying to ask. Um,
Well, you
how
have
to
to have a certain
respond to
amount
that?
of confidence in yourself that yes, I can do this. It's not a time to be timid. I mean, being humble doesn't necessarily mean being a doormat. Um, you, I want to be a leader. I want to be in charge. I feel like I have good ideas. I feel like I'm good at managing people and have that skill set. Um, so I am. Um, I have a confidence, but also have the humility to listen and to ask questions. And I think that's the thing. You have to be willing to ask questions, um, and also be willing to back up a little bit if you've gone at things wrong. Sometimes you start a conversation and you say like, "Ooh, that started off wrong. Let me," we're you know, especially if you notice something's becoming adversarial, you back up and say, let me start this again, and be willing to just kind of, share that we're both on the same team and I'm trying to get my head wrapped around this and, that kind of thing.
It sounds like being a leader isn't about knowing what you mean and what you're doing perfectly from the beginning. It's not about acting like you have all the answers. It's about being the person who's willing and responsible for making the decisions and learning how to. Would that be?
Yeah, well said, well said.
I was kind of trying to grasp what is leadership if it isn't knowing the answers, if it isn't being the one who's got it right, then what exactly is that leadership?
Well, it is about getting to that point, um, but you're not going to know everything. It's the ability to bring in those experts and bring in their information and sort through it and hear it out. Uh, Certainly.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of encouraging.
Oh, we all start from and we never. I mean, hopefully you're good at some point. I mean, you learn your business and you're good at what you do and understanding your business, but there's always going to be a learning curve, and you have to be teachable. If you're not teachable, um, you'll never be any good. And I've seen people that you know become good at what they do, and then they become know-it-alls, and then they're not teachable, and they're failing, and they're blaming everybody else. And what they end up doing is those good people leave, and all you have left are the people who can't leave, you know, and then, the whole thing just collapses. And
That's interesting.
yeah.
Okay. So, on a well, not yeah. So, another question that I have is there a book or resource that you would recommend a future leader to read or study?
My go-to book for everybody is Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It is the first book that I recommend, and anytime I'm doing the training program for a management team, I go through Seven Habits. Maybe not a full blown, depending on how long that team's been in place. But I will go through each of the seven habits, um, to the level of depth that I feel like they they need. So Seven Habits is first and foremost. Um, Lately, I've gone to after that books that deal with behavioral um, the behavioral sciences. There's a company called Vital Smarts that has a book called Influencer. And give me just a second. I will show you this book, Influencer. This is the new science of leading change. And it is an excellent book. There are some other resources around it that are pretty good. But basically, what they did is they looked at um, you have a demographic, you have a certain group of people, um, and you want to change the behavior of that group, whether it be your team, your organization, or whatever, because their behavior um, is such that it's not leading to success. They are failing. And then what you look for is you look for an outlier. Who's successful? And what's the difference between that successful person and how they manage? And then how can we influence this group um, through various methods to change their behavior to be more successful? I think it's a great book. I just it's an area that I've been you know dealing with, studying, using uh, for well over 10 years now. And to me, it makes a difference. Previously, I thought that it was about motivation and rah rah rah, and let's get people to see this, and people do the wrong things because it's easy to do the wrong thing. And so, if we can change their environment, the tools that they work with. Um, there's just a lot of different things that can be changed to help change the behavior. Um, People aren't failures, drug addicts, because it's working for them. It's not working for them. Yeah, initially it might have worked for them because it was the shortcut, it was the easy thing, it brought about a high. But in the end, they don't want to be that, but they are. The same way with a business manager that yells at his people, that disrespects people, that badgers people. He's doing those things, or she is doing those things, the case may be, um, because that action worked, at least initially, or it's the only tool that they have. If everything, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and um, so they're using that because it at least worked for them initially, um, and it's all they know. It's the only tool they have, and so we have to change people's behavior. And I think influencer gets you to look at how do we change people, and what things can we do? What things do we need to look at in order to change them? And leadership is about that. It's about changing how people interact, how they get their work done. Um, and if they're doing it well, hey, they become a model. What is it that that person's doing that makes them successful? And how can I pass that along to other people who aren't as successful? Um, in business, a lot of times, management team just looks at somebody who's not doing things well and let's get rid of them. And then they get another person in there and they're not doing well and we get rid of them. And we keep thinking, well, we can't hire good people. A lot of times we hire adequate people, but then don't know how to develop them to be, you know, in place where they need to be with the skill sets they need to be. So
Yeah,
those are my two book recommendations, anyways.
I wanted to ask you a little more about Seven Habits, actually, because I've heard a lot of people say that it's a really good book for leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of curious, what makes it so outstanding compared to other leadership books?
It's based upon principles. Stephen Covey, I want to say back in the 70s, looked at leadership development in the first 200 years of our history, American history, and took from that the principles that he used. He was seeing that the leadership principles after the last, well, at the time, the last 50 years for him, and now it's been the last 80 years, was based more upon personality, and how to win people and influence people. It had to do more with surface things about how to be winsome, how to be likable, and those kinds of things. And he went back and said, real leadership, up to, through World War I, World War II in the United States was a whole different thing. And what was it? And he boiled it down into the seven habits. And I would say it's based upon Christian principles. Once you say we're looking at the principles of the foundation of leadership in America, we are actually talking about principles of leadership that come from the Bible. And if you go through Seven Habits, he doesn't name scripture and stuff like that, but if you're familiar with the Bible and you're reading Seven Habits, you go like, that's what Jesus said, the golden rule, blah, 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 and you see where those things come from. The book itself is a tough read. It really is. Most people go to the seminar, watch stuff that somebody has boiled down what the seven habits are. Very few people actually read the book. The book is worth reading, but I will warn you, it's not an easy book to read. It's a tough book to read. It just is. Just the way that it's done. It's not light reading. It's not easy reading. It's a tough read, but it's well worth reading it, making the effort to do it. The only thing I disagree with on Covey is I disagree with him on diversity. I don't think you have to celebrate everybody's differences. I think that he kind of goes off the rails a little bit there. There is an element certainly of respect and things, but I just disagree with him on that. But most everything else, I think he's got right.
I'm guilty of having read about half of it and stopped, so I'll have to finish it.
I know. It took me a while. I was teaching seminars in Seven Habits before I actually, and had taught several before I actually finished the book. I mean, I had the the training manual and stuff, to go through, but to actually have read the book, it took me a while to finish it as well.
Yeah. I'll have to make a point to finish it. So now I wanted to ask you more about, actually, I heard from Dad that you, I don't remember if you said you used to teach leaders or if you still are doing that as a Um,
As
I
a
actually,
job.
as a job.
Yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to ask more about what that job was. How did you get started with it?
Okay.
Um,
I've been a training manager for a number of years now. Most recently, the last 5 years, I was teacher, and you can say that teaching high school students, you use all of your skill sets and beyond. Working with sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th graders. They will challenge every every skill set that you have, for sure. Especially when you're talking about doing online teaching, which we had to do the last. A lot of teachers didn't do anything the end of last year. Our school kept going. We held students accountable, did teaching, quizzes, tests, the whole deal. Um, we dealt with that. But prior to that, and one of my passions in life is teaching managers. And the way I got into it, I was working for Whirlpool, and I was bivocational pastor. I was pastoring a church and working at Whirlpool. And so I was working on an assembly line. Um, they had a training program, things that you went through. And as I was going through the classes, I began to think to myself, I can do this, and I think I could do it better than the person who's doing this. And so I began to have opportunities to do some teaching. And, personal computers were coming out back in the, mid 80s. I was an early learner, early adapter. Your dad also helped me some. He was quick to learn. And so I learned a lot of things from him. But then I would do Saturday classes. I would go into Whirlpool and offer a Saturday class on, using a personal computer, using Word, using, different things along that line. And so I got noticed. I started working with the training manager at Whirlpool, worked in his office and did different things for him. And then as he taught, began to take over doing training with him. I went to the library. I read up everything on everything I could about training and learning and development. So I became sort of self-taught on that process, and asked the library to, purchase certain books that I heard about, stuff like that, so that I could, get it. And then my next job was as a training manager with R.R. Donnelly. And then from Donnelly, I worked for several other companies and was a contract manager. And also it's just something that I kind of, you might say, fell into. Um, but it's also part of my personality. Uh, Growing up as my mother had a daycare, after school daycare. So kids would come to our house until their parents were done with work and would pick them up at the house. And so I had younger kids around me. So I would teach them, how to play different games, do different things. When I got into scouts, if I learned something, I helped next kid learn it. When I went into the Army and went overseas, I was just sort of thrown into this job. No clue, a very critical job dealing with, security things, top secret stuff. And it was generational type training. Like this person teaches this person, and then they teach the next person, they teach the next person, they teach the next person. But there's no real guidance and guidelines on what should be taught, how it should be taught, and that kind of thing. And it was horrendous. I was working with top secret stuff and didn't really know, can I do this or should I do this? Is this okay? You know? people are doing this, but I think that is like a violation, and we could all go to jail for 5 years and pay a $10,000 fine. So I began digging in and putting together like a training program, um, because the system we had just wasn't working. And so it's just part of, who I am. I want to understand stuff. I am deeply curious about how things work and why we do what we do. It's just there.
Yeah. Okay. So, so the so you've been a leadership manager in a lot of different places. Then, so it sounded like you were saying at one time. Did you say you were training managers for like individual businesses?
Yeah. Well, not so much individual businesses, but I generally worked for a company and was training their management team.
Okay.
So I would develop training programs um, that had to do with leadership in general. So, going through the 7 habits, communication, um, and just a number of different things depending on. I tend to look for um, things that are going wrong. Like you walk through um, a plant, a facility, and you see a manager's office and people lined up outside her door, um, 2 or 3 people deep. And at first, you don't think much of it because you think, oh, they're going to ask questions. But you come through that area, that customer service area, and you keep seeing that over and over again, and it dawns on you something's wrong. Why is it that those people are lined up outside her door? It's because they don't know how to do it, or they're seeking permission. And there's a problem there. That manager doesn't know how to delegate, how to train, and for that person to be able to go ahead and just do what they should do. There's not a policy in place. There's not development of that individual customer service person. And so they feel like they've got to come ask, because if they don't do it right, that manager is going to yell at them and, do terrible things to them. But the problem is the manager. The manager hasn't given that person enough permission. Yeah, there are times when that person should be coming to the manager, but it shouldn't be very often. If they don't know how to do something, they're unsure, then they need to have the tools to be able to, do their job. And so development comes out of just walking through and observing how people do things, and where are the bottlenecks, where are the pain points. And as a leader, you should be seeing those things. You should be looking at your business and know your business. Where's the bottleneck? Where are things stopping? And why is that? And what do we need to do to solve that? And that's what I do. I look at those things and say, whoa, there's an opportunity to begin to have a conversation between the customer service manager, and then see how we develop this person so that she develops her people, so that she's not putting out fires. There's a problem there. She's putting out fires. She's a firefighter. She feels good about herself. Wow. She shouldn't. Now, I'm not going to tell her, you're a terrible person. I'm going to say, like, okay, let's look at this. How do we, get a better flow here in the organization?
So I noticed you mentioned the thing of managers being able to delegate to the people under them. And I was curious, do you have any recommendations to a leader who does not know how to delegate? Any advice on how to learn to actually delegate to other people?
There's a whole course on that.
Well, that's
Yeah, there's a number of different things you have to evaluate, in that. where the person that you're delegating at, there's different levels of delegation. Before you bring a person on board and just say, here, take it, own it. So it's understanding where that person's at and what level you are comfortable with in delegating. But certainly, it takes time to delegate. And it's usually the reason people don't delegate. It is because I can do it better myself and I can do it quicker. The problem is long-term, it's not quicker because you're doing it all the time or you're micromanaging it all the time. But you need to, and part of 7 Habits is carving out time to, and Stephen Covey uses the big rocks, put the big rocks in first. If you're familiar with that analogy, put the big rocks in first and then the little things. Well, one of those big rocks that you put in first, that you don't try to put in last, is developing your people. And you take time for that. And you push away a lot of other things because in the long run, developing your people and delegating to them is critical. If you don't, then your chunk of time is managing and micromanaging and not delegating. So it's just, do a whole course on that. 2 hours at least to talk about how to, can't just tell you in 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
All right, so I have one more question. I think we kind of covered some of them together, but the one that I have left is, what one thing would you say that your leadership trainees struggled with the most when you were teaching them, and how? I know that sometimes it would take a while to explain how they can overcome that, but do you have any particular tips on?
What most people struggle with in a training environment, and I've done a lot of training. I mean, thousands of hours of training, and you get people that think they already know. They're coming into a class on delegation. And delegation is so simple. I mean, everybody knows how to delegate. You tell this person, here, take this and go do it. That's all there is to it, right? And they feel like they already know how to do it. They already know how to communicate. They're doing a good job. The problem is they don't know their blind spots. So in any training, it's getting people, first of all, to understand that they don't know as well as they think they know. And early on in my training, I would have a course and I would spill my guts and tell them how to do it. And I've done all this research and I know all this stuff. And I get to the end of it and you do an evaluation and say, well, I already knew this. It's just common sense. That would be my evaluation. Yeah, it was okay, but I already knew it, blah, blah, blah. So what I learned to do very quickly was I gave a quiz or a test, a scenario, and said, what would you do in this situation? And when they struggled with it or they didn't do it very well, then we'd begin to do the training because they knew that they didn't know, at least not as well as they thought they knew, or they had struggles with it. So anybody who's involved in leadership training should do an evaluation, should also get feedback from the direct reports of that manager of what they see, so that personally, as well as from your own evaluation of observing them, is that this is a blind spot for them. And that's what I think every leader struggles with. We don't know that we don't know. We don't know that we're not as good as we think we are. And part of developing a manager is, first of all, to help them to see that they don't see as clearly as they think they do. And I think that's important in developing leaders. And an area that I as a trainer struggle with is people that have been managers. They've come up through the ranks. They maybe been manager for several years, and I don't need to be in this training. Why do I need to come here for 2 hours? I've got things I need to be doing. I don't need to be in this class. That's a tough situation to be in. And I've solved that for myself by saying, let's do this little scenario. And you write down, what you see, or let's do this little like 5, 10 things, how do you do this, whatever kind of thing. And I want them at that point, hopefully, to fail, and to fail miserably, because then they will listen. Because then I have something to say that will help them. If I'm not helping you with something you feel you need, then you're zoned out, or if at the end of it, it should be that, this makes sense, and you've adapted it, brought it into your thinking so well that you think you knew it. And that's a common phenomenon in training, is people go through it and say, oh, I knew most of that, or I knew all of it, or, because you as a trainer have incorporated the analogies, the truths, the principles so well that they own it right away, and they forget that they didn't really do it that way before. But yeah, this makes sense, and that's a good way to do it. And that should be what happens, in good training. But it also, if they didn't know, they tend to turn around and say, oh, I knew that already.
Yeah. Interesting. So good leadership doesn't always leave someone feeling like, oh wow, this is all new and different, and I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
Because they're going to come to an agreement with you, but as you're teaching.
Yeah, training and good training is a kind of a strange phenomena, in that, it shouldn't be the first time they've seen some of this, but it should make sense to them. And a lot of times, in good training, it's repetition, and you know this, you sort of know this, you sense this,
Yeah.
But we're going to practice it till that becomes the way that you do it, the routine, the first thing that you go to, instead of your old way of how you handle things.
Yeah. That's awesome. I was debating whether I should ask you the other. So you said that you. I forgot. Never mind.
Okay.
Sorry, I had a different question, but I don't remember it. So let me just make sure that. Okay, I think that answers all the questions that I had prepared.
Alrighty. Well, I'm going to stop recording, and then I'm going to ask you a question as well.
Okay.